Hey guys, my name is Loveless, and this time we're back with Mollitudo, something like that. So let's get straight into it. Kachan? Katsuki's heart squeezes at the tiny fragile voice coming from the figure in front of him, bruised hands reaching out for him, and it was like a magnet drawing Katsuki onto his knees into all the. Oh god, there was so much blood surrounding them as he hugged Deku close to him. Emotions overwhelmed him: protectiveness, anger, worry, panic. It made him want to cry. Fuck, Deku, Katsuki whispered. Fuck. Katsuki noticed Aizawa moving to break the cuffs, but he couldn't look away from anything but the figure in his arms. He felt Deku clutch him tighter as he whimpered, and Katsuki didn't know what to do. He just felt like he needed Deku to know that he was there. It's okay, he started to say, a steady stream of reassurances tumbling out of his mouth. Whether it was for Deku or for himself, he didn't care. It's okay, nerd. We're here. I'm here. Kachan, did the doctors mention anything about my arms? Katsuki was snapped out of his flashback into the present as he heard Deku call out to him gently. His eyes panned to Deku's arms. Why? Concern painting his heart. Not that Deku would be able to tell. Did the bastard do anything to your arms? Deku shook his head, looking pathetically small in the bed. He played with his fingers. He had removed his hand from Katsuki's grip despite his denial, his hands feeling empty. He wanted to hold Deku, afraid that Deku would slip away if he didn't. I'm just worried. Because? Katsuki prompted, not trying to sound impatient. He locked my arms in place. I couldn't move them much at all. I thought they got strained because it hurt when he unlocked it to move me. Deku whispered, fingers trembling. Katsuki's eyes trailed to his wrist. Those dark bruises marred his pale skin. Healed abrasions circled the borders of his bruises. Katsuki wanted to punch that fucker again, but most of all, he wanted to know what happened to Deku. He hated not knowing what happened. The shitty nerd had a panic attack when he woke up, thrashing in bed and whimpering. Katsuki had no idea what to do, but when he heard Deku muttering for something to get off, he whipped the blanket off of him. He watched how the nerd calmed down and how he tentatively called out his name. He saw Deku look at him, eyes still unseeing but full of trust. Katsuki wanted to shout at him to focus, but he couldn't after seeing that expression. Katsuki was not stupid. He could tell the signs. Deku didn't want anyone to touch him. After he told the officers to fuck off, he saw how Deku looked uncomfortable even when his mom touched his head. But somehow, he trusted Katsuki unconditionally. Or maybe it was just in his head. But then again, he did not get it. Why would Deku trust him? After all that Katsuki had provided him over years of bad touches, the explosions. Then Deku had mentioned how he heard his voice. Katsuki's first instinct was to think that Deku had finally gone crazy, to hear the voice of his bully. For a split second, he also thought Deku had compared him to the kidnapper, and his stomach had dropped, sour bile building into his throat. But then Deku had said it was because Kachan was his symbol of victory, and Katsuki didn't know how to feel about that. Pride? Protectiveness? He felt an indescribable feeling. He also felt so useless, for he could not save Deku on his own. But Deku had explained with so much firmness and trust that Katsuki could not have helped but feel something. Kachan? There isn't anything wrong, right? Deku spoke up hesitantly. Katsuki realized he had gone so deep into his thoughts that he forgot to reply. No, fucking nerd. I think your arms are fine. Katsuki replied, angry he got distracted. He watched Deku sigh, a small, relieved smile on his face. Katsuki wanted to say something, but he was content to just watch Deku. It was like he wanted to convince himself that the nerd was back and was not going anywhere. It was barely past a week since the whole ordeal, but it felt so much longer. They both looked at the door as a knock sounded. Inko pinked into the room, saying hesitantly, Izuku? I know you said you wanted to be alone with Katsuki, but your friends are here. I can send them away if you're not ready. Deku perked up. No, Mom, it's okay. Just give me a minute, he said. He then turned to Katsuki. Kachan, can you help me sit up? Katsuki sighed loudly, grumbling. Not that he wouldn't have helped, but being rude is just built into Katsuki now, apparently. He leaned down to adjust the bed level. As the bed rised, he instinctively supported Deku, resting a hand on his back as he pushed himself up. Ah, ow, ow. Deku winced as his chest bent slightly. Watch it, shitty nerd. Ah, Kachan is so nice to me, Deku said happily, face flushed with joy. Katsuki's lips pursed down as he suddenly fought the urge to smile tenderly. Katsuki does not do fucking tenderness. What the hell? He does kind of like the healthy flush on Deku's face, though, as compared to the day he found him, carrying away from the hands of the paramedics, face pale and mouth wide as he heaved. He angrily shoved the vision away. He heard the door open as Yutaraka's loud voice carried into the room as the visitors walked in. Baby, I'm going to get some food with your teachers, so talk to your friends first, okay? Inko said, smiling warmly at Deku, who nodded. Deku, oh my god, you're awake! Yutaraka gushed as she took rapid steps towards him. Her eyes were wet. Hi, Yutaraka, Deku greeted. He then saw the rest. Hi, Todoroki, Ida, Kirishima. Dude, I'm so glad you're alive, Kirishima said, his cheerful demeanor infectious as the atmosphere seemed to pick up. Thank you, Kirishima, Deku stuttered. He blinked as Todoroki placed the stuffed bear on his lap. Todoroki smiled slightly. The class got this for you, Midoriya, Ida said loudly. Everyone wanted to come, but we decided to keep the visitation small at first, since we didn't know how you would react. Deku's eyes were wide in gratitude as he hugged the small bear. Thank you, guys, he said softly. Bakugo, have you been here the whole time? Kirishima asked. Haven't you been here since morning? Deku looked at him as Katsuki huffed angrily. Go screw yourself, shitty hair, was all he said, angry at being exposed. Kachan, it's already evening. Shouldn't you go back and rest or something? Deku, ever easily guilty, immediately said. It's fucking fine, nerd, Katsuki snapped, Todoroki giving a sneaky smile as he said, he's been here every day, even after school, to sit beside your bed. That's it, fucking half and half. You want to go? Katsuki growled, hands sparking dangerously. No fighting or yelling in the hospital, Bakugo, Ida yelled. Huh? You're yelling too, Four Eyes. Katsuki glared and shouted back. You're gonna get us all kicked out, Yutaraka whispered loudly, which was useless, because they were already fucking loud. Katsuki only stopped because he heard laughter. Are you laughing at me, shitty nerd? He snapped at Deku, who was giggling uncontrollably. He ignored how the laughter eased the tension in his stomach. No, Deku said breathlessly, wiping at his eyes. I just miss hearing everyone like this. Yutaraka, ever the emotional person, let out a whine as she reached forward, arms out. Deku, let me hug you, you precious bean, she cried, wiggling her fingers. Deku stiffened as he leaned forward in slight invitation, hands twitching upward as Yutaraka pushed past Katsuki, which, rude, and wrapped her arms around Deku gently. Kirishima nudged Katsuki. Can I talk to you real quick? He whispered. Katsuki looked at Deku, who was distracted with his nerd friends, and tilted his head up in question. Kirishima pointed to the door, and Katsuki followed him out. What do you want, shitty hair? Katsuki questioned. Kirishima just leaned against the wall, replying, Just wanted to know how you were doing. You seem so distracted the past few days. and you spent most of your time visiting Midoriya. I'm fucking fine, Katsuki replies, huffing. I know how you feel, though, not wanting to leave your friend's side, Kirishima says softly. You can't get that image of him in that room out of your head, can't you? He keeps his voice low. Katsuki knew he was right, but he kept quiet, eyebrows twitching. Kirishima placed a hand on Katsuki's arm as he said, Dude, it's completely manly to take care of Midoriya like this, but don't forget to take care of yourself. I know, shitty hair, Katsuki said, crossing his arms. I know that before I was never close to Deku. He looked at the closed door, but the nerd's terrified at some things, and somehow he trusts me, so... Kirishima smiled softly. Dude, this is so sweet to watch, he says, a hint of knowing in his voice. What the fuck did he mean? Katsuki thought angrily, not happy about the prospect of Kirishima knowing something he doesn't. What the fuck do you mean by that, shitty hair? Nothing. They both glanced to the left when they heard footsteps. They saw the nurse walking to them, smiling pleasantly. Hello. I heard Midoriya's awake. I brought his dinner, the nurse said cheerfully. They both pushed open the door and trailed behind the nurse. Katsuki saw how Deku perked up as he saw Katsuki. Where did you go, Kachan? He asked. Katsuki shrugged. When he got closer, Deku relaxed at his proximity. The tension Katsuki just noticed that was building in his shoulders, releasing. The nurse placed the tray on the table and left. Deku, you should eat. Don't worry about us, Yutaraka said, pointing to the food. It was normal hospital food. Rice, vegetables, some meat and gravy. Katsuki watched as Deku nervously picked up the chopsticks. Ah, yes. Katsuki could tell the nerd was nervous. Why was he nervous? He watched intensely as Deku started eating, taking small, tentative bites. Ida seemed to think Deku was just awkward at being scrutinized, as they began talking about their classwork, including Deku at certain times. Deku just smiled, slightly chewing his food. After a quarter of his meal in, Deku's face suddenly twisted as he placed his chopsticks down. His chewing stopped and Deku started looking sick. What's wrong, nerd? Katsuki immediately asked, having been observing Deku the entire time. Deku just reached for water, hands shaking as he drank it tightly. The conversation died down as everyone looked at Deku worriedly. Are you okay? Deku, did you choke? Yutaraka said quietly, as Todoroki took the cup to refill his water. Deku took deep breaths, looking as if he was close to another panic attack. Katsuki grabbed Deku's hand. Oi, Deku, talk to us, he said clearly. Deku slightly shook for a while, throat repeatedly bobbing from the swallows. Sorry, he said after a while, gripping Katsuki's hand tightly. It's just been a while since I've had solid food. My stomach... Oh my god, stupid nerd. Katsuki pinched his nose, groaning loudly. You should have said something. Ida had already pressed the nurse button as he chastised. Midoriya, if you haven't eaten solid food in a while, you have to slowly eat your solids. You can't just suddenly stuff so much into your stomach. Uh-huh, Hideki whispered. I realized. The nurse walked into the room looking concerned. What happened? Kirishima helped to explain as Yutaraka placed a hand on Deku's back, rubbing it. Oh, honey, the nurse cooed as she moved the table out of the way. We'll get you a smaller portion of food. Don't eat so fast, okay? How long have you not had solids? Deku swallowed hard, then replied, assuming I didn't eat any solid food when I was in the hospital the whole time that I was gone, plus the 5 days. He squeezed Katsuki's hand and continued, I'm not very hungry anymore. My stomach feels bloated. I didn't have much when I was there. Also, he trailed off. The nurse frowned. Were you given food at all? Deku nodded, averting his eyes. I had food packets, was all he said. Katsuki thought maybe he should go and punch that bastard again in jail anyway. Okay, honey, you don't have to finish this, okay? She said, picking up the tray as she left the room. Deku, sensing the atmosphere turn gloomy again, murmured sadly, Sorry to ruin the mood. His head was bowed, and his lips were pursed. Aw, Midoriya, you didn't ruin anything, Kirishima said gently. Todoroki nodded. It's important to convey your problems to others, then you can recover faster. Mm-hmm. Deku nodded. Thanks, guys. After that, the teachers returned together with Inko, who told everyone to go home. Kachan, it's okay. You should go back, Deku was saying, as Katsuki, who absolutely was not hovering, stood beside his bed. He scoffed. Are you sure, Deku? Are you going to cry when I'm not around? It sounded harsh, but really, he was trying to show concern, because he can be fucking pleasant when he puts his mind to it. Deku seemed to understand, and his eyes crinkled from his smile. Yes, you can go back to the dorms, Kachan. Inko, who was silently watching, spoke up. Katsuki, I'll leave my phone here beside his bed, so if anything happens, Izuku can call you. Katsuki took one long look at Deku, who nodded encouragingly. Fine, whatever. It's not like I wanted to stay. Bye, Deku. Bye, Kachan, Deku squeaked out. Despite Izuku's bold words, he found himself unable to sleep at night. He knew his mom was nearby, but whenever he closed his eyes, he heard Vex's voice in his head. He hated being so weak. He hated the fact that he was stuck in the hospital. He squeezed his eyes shut again. Just sleep, Izuku. Then opened it in frustration when he stayed stubbornly awake. Now that he was alone, the events played out clearly in his mind. His skin tingled, the feeling of bugs remaining. He was never very tactile, as he was not used to casual touches. Middle school was not nice to Izuku, after all. He was so overwhelmed when he was back in the room, where Vex kept touching him. He felt violated. Even though Vex never did more than touching, it was never meant to be sexual. But the way his voice sounded, the look in his eyes, he didn't want to know if Vex ever intended to do more. Izuku looked out the window large enough to show the twinkling stars gently in the sky. He knew he was safe. His mom was sleeping soundly in the temporary bed nearby. There was light. He could see the stars. He was not in the room. But stuck on the bed, unable to get up due to his knee, he felt stuck. He felt like he could not move. Izuku wanted to scream out in frustration. He felt his eyes watering again, and he wiped them angrily. He did not want to feel weak. He glanced at his mom's phone, which was placed within his reach. Showed that an hour passed ever since he attempted to sleep. He felt the immense urge to call Kachan. His hands reached for his phone, but before he could stop them, he held the phone in his hand, already unlocked, fingers hovering over Kachan's name. I shouldn't disturb him, Izuku thought, placing the phone on his chest as he stared blankly at the ceiling. He closed his eyes again. Izuku, and opened again when Vex's voice surfaced again. He unlocked the phone and pressed the number before he could think twice. Deku, what's wrong? Kachan's craggy voice said at first, alertness slipping into it gradually. Are you okay? Sorry, Kachan, Izuku said softly, trying to not wake up his mom. Well, what's wrong? I need to hear your voice. He paused. Then Kachan deadpanned. I don't think that's all, Deku. Izuku gulped. I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing his voice in my head, Kachan. Once he started talking, he could not stop. I feel disgusting, he said, voice trembling. Kachan stayed quiet for a while, as Izuku heard the rustling of sheets as he moved. I'm sorry for calling you so late, Kachan. He shook. I know you always sleep early. Don't be sorry, Deku. Katsuki. Kachan grunted out. I'm not angry or any shit. Every time I close my eyes, I think of him, Izuku said. I don't want to, but I keep feeling his touches. Fuck, Deku. Katsuki's voice sounded breathy, as if the words were punched out of him. Listen to me. I'll talk to you instead. Izuku nodded before remembering that he was on the phone. Okay, Kachan. He listened to Kachan's voice as he droned on about the lessons he missed. Kachan is such an amazing person, Izuku thought, as he wiped his eyes. He listened as Kachan continued talking. Kachan droned on for minutes, occasionally stopping, his voice low, but steady. After a while, Kachan quieted. A pause. Don't panic, nerd. It's just me. Huh? Izuku said before the door to his room inched open. Kachan? He almost yelled. He almost yelled before Kachan placed a finger on his lips, hanging up the phone. Shut the hell up, Deku, he whispered loudly. Do you want me to get kicked out? He looked at the bed Mom was in. Or do you want me to wake up Auntie? Katsuki closed his mouth, staring dumbfoundedly as Kachan walked up to his bed. Scooch over, he grunted. Izuku, still surprised, only moved slightly, inching as much as he could to the side. Kachan searched his face for any signs of uncomfortableness, before towing off his shoes, crawling into the bed. Izuku, despite himself, flushed. Why did you come here? Kachan began to look unsure and awkward, as if his own decision suddenly occurred to him. Should I go? No! Izuku grabbed Kachan's arm. I just feel bad for having you come here, he confessed. But I'm glad you're here. He turned onto his side, facing him properly. Don't sleep on your side, stupid nerd, Kachan immediately said, pushing against his shoulder. In case your small brain forgot, your chest is still injured. It doesn't hurt, Izuku whispered. Kachan fell silent. It was then Izuku realized how close they were. Both curled up slightly as their arms supported their heads, facing each other. Their toes were slightly touching, but they still had a sliver of space between them. Their free arms dangled in front of them, fingers barely grazing each other. Izuku would feel embarrassed, but in the moment, looking at Kachan, who was bathed in starlight, he felt his breath taken away. He studied Kachan's face. He's so glad that Kachan was here, was willing to stay by his side. He thought there was no way that they could ever regain their friendship, with it being so ruined from middle school. He thought Kachan would never want to be beside him again. However, ever since Kachan apologized, he's felt a huge difference in their dynamics. They became friends. And now, he was so willing to drop everything to visit Izuku. His heart felt full. He felt like he could trust him fully. He wondered if it was because it's Kachan. Kachan has always been different, after all. Izuku would process the feeling later when he's not as distracted. Kachan? He blurted out impulsively. Kachan's sleepy eyes focused on him. Why did you come here? He asked again. Kachan's peaceful face changed as he frowned minutely. Izuku waited, but he didn't reply. After a long pause, he said, Honestly, I don't know. I thought it would help. Izuku gave a wobbly smile as his fingers inched forward, covering the distance as he placed them on top of Kachan's fingers, letting his fingers touch. Thank you, Kachan. Izuku, whose eyes had been fluttering sleepily, hummed. You said you kept feeling his touches, Kachan questioned, almost hesitantly. Did he... Even though he trailed off, Izuku understood. No, he said firmly, but when he was... He gulped as he paused, Kachan moving his hands this time, such that it was on top of his fully, and show of support. Whenever he hurt me, he would touch me, like... He stopped, unable to describe. He just sounded so... He was always so excited to hurt me, and... I get it, he interrupted. You don't have to continue. Izuku's mouth closed. Glad that he didn't have to. Thank you for telling me, Kachan murmured. Sleep, nerd. He needed his fingers. Izuku shifted such that he was closer, and he could smell Kachan's natural sweet scent. His eyes drooping, drowsiness finally setting when he felt safe. Good night, Kachan, he whispered. Good night, Deku. Oh my god, it's so fucking sweet, but this thing breaks my heart. Oh my god. But yeah, so I was like, yay, we got this all done. And also that my goal is pretty much to post twice a week. That is my goal. I'm not too sure if I'll always do it, but I will damn well try. So, if you want to see more of this, you know what to do.